Hello and welcome to the History of Diving Museum. We're located in the beautiful Florida Keys at mile marker 83. For those of you who are watching on our YouTube channel, for those of you that are here, thank you for attending. Thank you for being members, coming early to see the Dive Into Art program. We do have, before we get started on our program, we do have a special announcement. As I was mentioning, on Giving Tuesday, we do a huge campaign to raise money for art supplies, for teachers, for the work that we do with the schools to be able to produce the Dive Into Art exhibit. So this year, we have a particular family that's with us tonight, and they gave in honor of Emily, I always call her Shriver. Thank you. So Emily Shriver, her unfortunately she passed away after a battle of cancer, but she was an SSI instructor. She taught scuba rangers. She had the Environment with Emily little program that she did. So she really inspired a lot of people to become active and to become divers and to enjoy their diving careers. So we were honored when unfortunately she passed away, but the family donated to the museum. And so if I can get you ladies to come up, you four ladies, we have two aunts. Yes. Okay, fine. So we have representatives from Emily's family. We have Carla, Camille, and then friends Karen and Mary. And what we want to do is we want to present you with our donor. This is a copy of the donor poster, so you can take it back to the family. And we're glad to have Emily part of our exhibit and what she's done in the dive community. So, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So as mentioned, the Dive Into Art will be open till April 17th. We also have a Dive Into Art and Music event that will be happening with a Rainbow Full of Sound. It's a Grateful Dead tribute band. Yes, for those of you that were here last year, you come back. It's going to be, we'll have details on our website soon. We also have Jerry Garcia art that all proceeds from that go to benefit the Dive Into Art program. And moving forward, because we're already planning for 2025. Today's the opening for 2024, and we've got 2025 planned. Next month, for our Immerse Yourself Super, another program that we do besides Dive Into Art is on the third Wednesday of every month, we have an Immerse Yourself. For those of you that are in the room, thank you. Is this anybody's first time at the History of Diving Museum? Oh, yeah. You say, but yes. Well, thank you. We say don't drive by, dive in. So that's our thing. Tell your friends that. Don't drive by, dive in. So thank you for being here. Next month, we are going to do a virtual presentation. So if anybody is in town and they don't have access to internet, they can come and they can watch it here. But actually, our speaker is in Canada. David St. Pierre is going to be talking about salvaging the Empress wreck, which unfortunately went down in May in 1914. And there was a lot of salvage that was done with that. So he came across in his research, some recent photos of actually divers working in that time period, doing some salvage work. So it's going to be real interesting to see what their idea of current dive procedures and diving and salvaging is about. So that's next month on the third Wednesday of February. Tonight, we have Maddie and JD. They are with Mission Iconic Reefs. They work for NOAA. They've done a lot of really fabulous programs. They're going to tell us about the whole Mission Iconic Reef program that's up and down the Florida Keys, as well as what snorkelers and divers can do and learn about that. Yes, we are. So thank you. For those of you who have questions, throughout the program, raise your hand. They'll answer them for you. If you're online, tell us who you are, where you're from, how many people you have with you, and then type in your questions, and Julia will be moderating that and bringing those into our presentation room. So we'll be able to include everybody, both virtually and in person. So thank you all for being here, and now it's on you.
Fantastic. Thank you all for being here today. So My name is Cholnoky, and I'm the Mission Iconic Reef Stewardship Manager at NOAA's Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary.
And some of you know me, but my name is JD Reinbott, and I am the Iconic Reef Guardians Stewardship Coordinator with the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, which is the nonprofit partner of NOAA.
So today we're going to be talking about Iconic Reef Guardians, which is Mission Iconic Reef Stewardship Program. More specifically, we're going to talk about how the program has developed, what's currently happening on our online platform, and the program's response to the 2023 mass bleaching event. We're also going to talk about how dive operators in the Florida Keys are using this program to incorporate marine conservation into their business plans. So we wanted to start off with some background on Iconic Reef Guardians to set the stage for advancements within this presentation. The Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary oversees Mission Iconic Reefs, as well as the Blue Star dive operators. Mission Iconic Reefs is a 20-year projected mission that's taking place in the Florida Keys to help restore the Florida Reef Tract. And the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary spans from Miami down south past the Dry Tortugas and is protected area. My supervisor frequently says, if you're in the Florida Keys and you dip a toe in the ocean, you're in a protected place. So within those facets falls Iconic Reef Guardians. And to participate in Iconic Reef Guardians, you must be a Blue Star dive operator. And the Blue Star dive operators we'll talk about a little bit later on in this presentation in that recognition program. So, talking about the Blue Star dive operators. This recognition program is an extra step that a lot of dive operators in the Florida Keys take to help their clients better understand being environmental stewards and interacting responsibly with the natural resources within the Florida Keys. To participate in Iconic Reef Guardians, as I stated, the dive operators should be recognized by Blue Star. So there's different components of Mission Iconic Reefs, and one of those components is stewardship and community engagement. And JD and I fall under that pillar. So it's essential to the success of Mission Iconic Reefs to look at stewardship and the way that we're engaging with the community at different levels. Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, restoration partners, and the community at large has worked together to develop this program, Iconic Reef Guardians, a program that's going to work directly with the dive operators to empower scuba divers and snorkelers to become knowledgeable and supportive of coral restoration efforts and to become stewards of the 7 Mission Iconic Reef sites. Blue Star diving operators are currently being trained to lead these dives. Divers and snorkelers can take part in these experiences that will teach them about coral reef restoration taking place in the Florida Keys, and allow them to experience both the sensitivity and resilience of coral reef ecosystems firsthand. The program creates opportunity for divers and snorkelers to contribute to the first of its kind mission to restore the Florida Keys for generations to come. This program is a little bit different than other restoration programs currently taking place in the Keys because it allows the dive operators as businesses to independently engage in restoration efforts, resulting in more divers in the water, supporting restoration and new ways for them to market and sell these experiences to their clientele. We all here have a conservation origin story, an experience that allowed us to connect and fueled our need to protect. For many, we hope that Iconic Reef Guardians will be the start of that story. Now, we'll take you through the process that dive professionals go through to become Iconic Reef Guardians.
So first and foremost, the professional divers that are working at these operations complete online training modules. And sorry, I'm very stuffy, so I sound very weird today. They complete online training modules and corresponding knowledge reviews similar to that of a dive specialty certification. Once they have completed all of this online training, These individuals then complete in-water checkout dives to make sure they're physically comprehending all of the components that they learned online. These next few slides will kind of take a moment and give you a glimpse into what this online learning management platform looks like, where you can see things like that of the overall layout. Maddie and I kind of always liken it to that of like a PADI e-learning course. The setup of specific courses, which include modules on topics pertinent to the Iconic Reef Guardians program, which allow professional divers to become more knowledgeable on the coral restoration itself. And then also insights into the content contained within these modules, like in-depth presentation created with the guidance of partner restoration organizations, knowledge reviews to ensure material comprehension, and various handouts for professional divers to use while guiding their participants underwater. However, one of our all-time favorite part or feature of this platform, Maddie and I like have constant email threads together where we're just geeking out over this, is the fact that we can quantify the impact that this training has on the divers who join, tracking their awareness of restoration-related topics, both before and more importantly, after they join for these trips. So, for example, when we initially asked divers who were joining for a passive coral nursery experience how familiar they were with the causes of coral decline in the Florida Keys, 7.7% responded with not familiar, another 7.7% responded with undecided, another 7.7% responded with only a little familiar, and the remaining 76.9% responded with familiar. However, after completing an Iconic Reef Guardians online training, we saw a massive shift in these survey responses, with the very same divers now indicating 84.6% strongly familiar and 15.4% familiar. Again, massive shift. Similarly, when we asked how familiar participants were with the way that divers and or snorkelers can support reef restoration, the responses showed 7.7% being undecided, an occurring number we see a lot of apparently, 30.8% familiar, and 61.5% strongly familiar. And again, after completing this course, these responses shifted to 7.7% familiar and 92.3% strongly familiar. We can obtain metrics like the ones that you just saw for any of the questions that currently exist and are housed within this online learning management system. Sorry, look at this. I talk with my hands. And we can also do this and add additional questions if we feel them necessary or they're even requested by, let's say, a pilot operator or even a restoration organization. These metrics not only demonstrate the efficacy of Iconic Reef Guardians, but can also help the two of us, the two madmen behind the wheel, identify what areas of our training need further development. And there is a lot that goes into this learning management system. I could spend like 2 hours giving you an entire presentation on that, but that's not what you signed up for tonight. So for those of you that are interested in seeing more than just a glimpse, feel free to scan this QR code or even go to the URL, because I know sometimes QR codes are the bane of my existence. So you can go ahead and take some time to look at that. If any of you have any issues accessing this, feel free to come talk to myself and or Maddie after the presentation, and we'll happily get you access to it. I'll leave it up there for like 10 seconds if anyone wants.
See some thumbs.
While we're waiting for people to scan, how many shops or dive professionals are currently using your program and taking people out?
Yeah. So right now, we currently have 2 operators that are working with us. We have Quiescence Diving Services up in Key Largo, and then we also have Florida Keys Dive Center, which is now down in technically Isla Verona. But we're working to scale that number up to a much larger size. Eventually, we basically want to have any interested Blue Star dive operator throughout the entirety of the Florida Keys able to take part in this program and get their dive pros further involved. But there's a lot of steps and processes that go into it. So we're starting small to make sure we have a proven and effective model before we scale it up to a much larger sense.
Thank you.
Of course.
So once a dive professional has completed and passed all the online training requirements, they're able to then complete the in-water training components. Professional divers practice leading recreational divers through different experiences. There are skills that the professional divers must demonstrate in the water to be approved to take their clients through these experiences. And with that said, who here would like to go for a virtual dive? Put on your scuba mask and we'll take you through an Iconic Reef Guardians experience from the perspective of a recreational dive client. You giant stride into the warm, bright blue water. As you look down, you get your first ever glimpse of a coral nursery. Hundreds of coral trees loom below you and are visible in every direction as far as your eyes can see. You're led on a tour of the nursery by your trained Iconic Reef Guardian dive professional. You discover a forest of coral trees, growing branching and bouldering corals that will repopulate the reefs of the Florida Keys. After a short break between dives, you jump back into the water. This time, you carry tools like dishwashing brushes that will help care for the coral trees. You practice cleaning these trees in the classroom and are now eager to try it in the water. This will help the young corals grow and get ready to help rebuild the reef. A year has passed, and now you're back in the Florida Keys for yet another Iconic Reef Guardians dive. This time, you're going to be helping care for the baby corals, which were once in the nursery, but are now at one of the Mission Iconic Reef sites. The Blue Star operator you're diving with visits this site each month to care for these baby corals. Today, you're taking part in a reef experience, which involves removing marine debris and organisms that can harm the coral, conducting invertebrate surveys, and monitoring coral health to participate in community science and impactful data collection. So, as we noted in that virtual dive, Iconic Reef Guardians consists of different experiences. There are 3 primary experiences. The first one that we spoke about is called passive coral nursery tours. Passive nursery is one of the first stages of Iconic Reef Guardians. And once the Blue Star dive operator is trained and does the online training and the in-water checkout dives in a coral practitioner's nursery, they then are approved to take dive clients in that nursery and take part in passive interactions with those coral trees. So this experience is hands-off and people learn about what's happening in a coral nursery, why it's there, what corals are growing, why it's important, but there's no hands-on activities for this component of Iconic Reef Guardians. The next component is active coral nursery. The experience I mentioned before, passive coral nursery, is currently occurring. So people can take part in those dives today if they wanted to. Active coral nursery, which I'm about to speak about, is in developmental stages. So active coral nursery is going to consist of the Blue Star dive operators who have done the online training in the in-water checkout dives to be able to help with hands-on maintenance of the coral nurseries in the way that the coral practitioners deem appropriate and necessary. And lastly, the third component that I talked about is reef experience. And reef experience is going to have the trained Blue Star dive professionals lead participating divers through reef monitoring and maintenance at specific Mission Iconic Reef sites. So the operators are encouraged to care for specific sites that they decide make sense for their geographic location that align with Mission Iconic Reefs and visit that site once a month to care for the baby corals that are out there. So how are we currently bringing this program to life? We selected 2 Blue Star dive operators, as JD mentioned, Florida Keys Dive Center and Quiescence Diving Services, to work alongside the coral practitioners throughout this program, Coral Restoration Foundation, Mote Marine Laboratory, and Reef Renewal USA. The first Iconic Reef Guardians dive actually took place less than a year ago and involved a father and his 16-year-old daughter who expressed that she dreamt of one day being a marine biologist. The father, following the Iconic Reef Guardians experience, expressed, "I wish I lived closer to take part in this more often with my daughter." So earlier this year, the first stages of this program were in full swing and growing in number of participants. Dive operators through the Iconic Reef Guardians pilot would come to us and express that they had divers reaching out to them after seeing the program offered on websites and social media and asking how they could get more involved. However, in July 2023, a mass bleaching event took hold of the Florida Keys, as many of us in this room are aware. The coral practitioners, as a result, needed to come up with new and innovative ways to aid their coral nurseries. As a result, Iconic Reef Guardians coral nursery experiences were halted. We just actually resumed this experience recently within about a month ago. And so now people can take part in this experience again, but in small scale while the nurseries are being built up in the way that they need to be. So when this happened and our program shut down, JD and I got together and we said, what now?
We had a lot of time.
Yeah. We also had so many people reaching out to us asking, what can we do? How can we get involved? What can we do to help? And so with people reaching out to us, we knew that we had to take next steps in Iconic Reef Guardians and pivot the program in a way that could be beneficial for its participants. So we created a fourth experience, now partnering with Southeast Florida Action Network, also known as CFAN. We are developing coral bleaching training so that Iconic Reef Guardians participants can continue to have a positive impact, and the dive operators are able to market conservation-oriented experiences to their clientele that are productive for those people participating if and when bleaching events occur. Also, as a baseline as well. So we've talked with the dive operators, and there's a ton of inherent value in also taking part in this experience when there isn't a bleaching event going on. So that way people know how to report that there's opportunity out there to submit impactful data, and that it's good to report no matter the time of year and no matter what's occurring. So this bleaching course, which is also available on the platform that JD oversees, will teach participants about coral, bleaching, disease, the impacts that occur when this happens, and how those individuals can help make a difference. Participants will survey corals and submit the data to CFAN with their Iconic Reef Guardians dive professional overseeing that process. They will learn how their data contributes to better understanding and response to bleaching events like the one that happened recently.
And like Maddie was just saying, for those of you who are interested, this is currently being piloted by both Florida Keys Dive Center as well as Quiescence Diving Services. I'm not going to call on Quiescence in the back row right now, but please feel free to come and talk to us afterwards about how you can get further involved in this, as well as passive coral nursery experiences, since again, we are scaling up those programs as well. And again, just basically stating that if you are participating in this, you're taking part in this program and really helping work to scale up this restoration work, and also the big part of our work, stewardship. And the last thing we kind of wanted to bring up is talking about the overall impact this has had for our local diving businesses. Earlier on, Maddie had talked about how this program is a little bit different and the fact that it really puts the power in these dive operators, right? So our two participating dive operators expressed that they were first initially motivated to apply to the Iconic Reef Guardians program because of how it built up their reputation for responsible ecotourism, a huge thing for us down here in the Keys, and also highlighted their staff's retention due to their passion for marine conservation. As divers, we want to get our hands dirty, for the lack of better words. We want to take part in this work, and staff members hearing that they can now take that extra step was a really big part in getting more and more dive shops on board. On this slide, you can see direct quotes pulled from 2 of our pilot dive operators. And to save my nasally voice, I'll give you all about 10 seconds and you can read some of those quotes. It's been fun talking like this on meetings. But again, really showing the impact that this has and how much buy-in there is from the local dive businesses themselves. Our participating operators said that social media posts and website links have resulted in an influx of phone calls, emails, and direct messages with more questions about the program in the days immediately following afterwards. They also expressed that the partnership they now have with these coral restoration practitioners has resulted in an increase in program participation and awareness amongst both locals and visitors. It's really cool to be able to see these relationships scale up and build. We all work down here, we all live down here together, right? And this program is really bringing together all these different sectors. Sorry, I'm gonna smack you again. All these different sectors and components of our community of people who want to give back to the reef and pulling it all together under that umbrella that is Iconic Reef Guardians. One of our pilot dive operators also expressed that their promotion of conservation-focused opportunities has generated inquiries in all conservation-specific diving. They have had guests who have previously done a marine debris removal dive, and those same guests are now returning to take part in an Iconic Reef Guardians experience. Operators have told us that they've also routinely received phone calls from guests who have seen them listed on the Coral Restoration Foundation's website and call to get involved with these restoration efforts. A shameless plug here as well, we used to really heavily rely upon CRF's website. They have this beautiful calendar of functionality that has all the upcoming Iconic Reef Guardian trips. We recently just published and finalized our own webpage as well. So this information is still on CRF website, but it's also now on ours as well. And Maddie and I can share that resource with you as well if you're interested in looking at upcoming dates. These operators additionally noted that these customers are generally ones that have high retention. So they're coming back multiple times over and over and over again. And the last thing to express is how these operators have really enjoyed and continue to enjoy the flexibility of the Iconic Reef Guardians material. And they can often pair it with specialties that their shops may offer, like that of Patty's Coral Reef Conservation Specialty or SSI's Coral Identification Specialty. Many of these guests have participated in multiple of these conservation-focused scuba experiences. So again, really building up that base for not only the professional divers, but also allowing these recreational divers and snorkelers to become conservation experts as well.
Oh boy.
With all of that being said, the Iconic Reef Guardians program has created conservation-oriented experiences for both the dive industry in the Florida Keys and the recreational participants in a multifaceted way, encouraging ocean stewardship, connecting organizations, and allowing for new partnerships to take place. Additionally, we're finding new ways to attract dive clients and also the opportunity to increase employee engagement. Conservation-oriented experiences, such as that of Iconic Reef Guardians, are not only doing good for the environment, but also improving local businesses. Maddie and I think I speak for both of us, are extremely excited to see how the Iconic Reef Guardians program and its many partners continue to grow together over the year and also for the foreseeable future. Thank you all for your time, and we are happy to open it up to any questions that you may have.
The judge to rethink dismissing his charges. Oh my God.
So, is there any thought of trying to expand coral to move further north with how the waters are getting warmer and warmer? Has that been looked at? Is that even feasible because of
14 trillion.
landscape underneath the water?
So one thing that we want to do, when a question is asked in here, if you all would restate the question for the people that are online, just in case they can't hear the back of the room.
Yeah.
And then.
Okay. So to repeat it, and correct me if I say it wrong, basically if there's any potential to look into relocating or moving corals further north into the other parts north of, like, let's say Carey's Fort Reef per se, right? Cool. I don't know if you have anything to speak on it from the sanctuary side of things. I'll pull a little bit from my experience prior to working at the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation. There are a lot of other restoration organizations that are working up in, like, let's say the Miami-Dade region that are also doing similar work in coral restoration efforts. I admittedly don't know a lot of the logistics and the permitting side of things. It may not be as big of an issue since technically up further north is an extension of the Florida Keys Reef Tract. I know there's a lot of permitting logistics and moving, let's say, a coral from Florida to or somewhere else tropical, Bonaire, because of the genetics behind it. So I know that there is a lot of work also happening up north in terms of coral restoration. From a Mission Iconic perspective, or even an Iconic Reef Guardians perspective, that's really not so much our lane, for the lack of better words. And a lot of the work with us and our organizations is still heavily focused right now in the Florida Keys. But the cool thing with our work and stuff like Iconic Reef Guardians or even Mission Iconic Reefs as a whole is by building up these programs, whether it's stewardship or restoration, we can have it as a model that other organizations, let's say in Miami-Dade, even though it's close,
Oh
it's
my
still
goodness, cool equipment.
can then apply and scale up as well. So right now, circling back, I'm a tangent person, not immediately, but we can use that as a base to help scale up that work.
Then I was curious if the nurseries are site specific. So at Molasses Reef, is there a little nursery and whatever you grow there stays in Molasses Reef, and then another reef will have its coral? Or do you have like more of a massive plantation and then they get moved to the reefs? I'm just curious how that
of course,
happens.
So repeating the question, is if the nurseries themselves are more so site specific, or if there's kind of like a mass nursery where it's pulled from. The really cool thing with coral restoration, so looking at moat, reef renewal, and CRF, I know there's some CRF and reef renewal people in here too, so if you want to correct me and I say it wrong, please feel free. They do a lot of nurseries throughout the entirety of the Florida Keys. I used to be an intern and also a staff member at the Coral Restoration Foundation. Granted, that was a while ago, so these numbers and metrics may have changed. But we had a nursery in Carysport, we had a nursery in Tavernier, we had a nursery in, Roxanne's gonna yell at me, Key West, and I think one other. I know they recently developed one in Luke Key as well. So with those nurseries, when we were doing it, you could grow and cultivate the coral fragments there and house them and take care of them. And then let's say Carysport Nursery, we could grow corals at Carysport and outplant them to Carysport Reef, but we could also take those corals from Carysport and outplant them to Marker 32 down in Key West.
Cool. My last question, thank you for the.
Oh,
yes,
you're totally fine. You're totally fine.
Of course, the warmer weathers really impact the coral reefs, and people touching them and breaking them affect the coral reefs. But how much is any decline in the fish or the increase in lionfish affecting the coral, and which coral is more affected?
So again, hi everyone, repeating the question. Talking about what the overall correlation in terms of, wow, I just totally lost the question. How the decline is impacting coral or fish species as well, and like even like the abundance of lionfish and how that's impacting the reef, right? Admittedly, I don't have that answer off the top of my head. I know that there have been some studies done that have looked at the restoration and the impact of when they're putting corals back out on the reef and how much of the fish biodiversity physically increases as a result of that. I don't know off the top of my head if there's been anything done to look at the correlation of lionfish abundance and then reef decline. I don't know if you know of Reef up in Key Largo. They do a lot of work with fish counts and also lionfish removal. I can get you information for their contacts and always connect you with them because they may have a better response than I do.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course, yeah.
I appreciate
Good,
it.
very good questions. How do we pick? You pick someone.
Does NOAA have a position on the future of our reefs if the 1.5 degree temperature is exceeded?
So NOAA as an entity, the question is, does NOAA have a stance if you said if it increases 1.5 degrees, if the water
Exceeds
temperature.
that, threshold, yes.
So I do not have the answer off the top of my head, but I can reach out to our direct science team at NOAA and make sure to get you the correct answer and connect you to the correct people. And I'm happy to provide my business card after.
That's a very good question and a concern, I'm sure, with many of us.
Yes, and that's why I want to make sure to provide the best and most correct information. And I don't necessarily have that because of the department that I work in, but I can definitely connect you to the correct people.
Yeah, I have a question to you. We have a house in Chabonnier and we have a long dock. One of the few people who haven't bought a boat recently, but we have a long dock. Is there anything that we could do, you know, basically in our daily lives to, you know, promote the growth of coral, even if we're not ourselves? I'm more of a snorkeler, not a scuba diver, so I don't know if I'm gonna do that. Is there anything that, you know, I don't want to say as a consumer, but somebody who resides here, they could do to improve the quality of the coral? You know, whether we don't pollute the water or we, you know, I don't know, is there any, that's just a general question.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And also it's really important to address it because a lot of times with coral restoration work, everyone thinks they need to be physically underwater 24/7, like alpine coral doing all work, and that's great. But also you can think about the small, simple shifts that you can do when you're on land. So again, repeating the question for everyone, as individuals who live down here in the Keys, or arguably you could even say the same thing for people who live anywhere in the world, what can we do kind of in our day-to-day basis or day-to-day routine to help promote coral growth? The first thing I would argue, and this is my opinion, is doing this. Education is power. I know that's like such like an overdone statement, but like so many people, even people who live down here in the Florida Keys, don't realize what's happening. They go out and dive molasses and say, wow, that was really cool. There was so much coral, and it's like, not really. So education and working to attend events like this and also spreading the word is monumental. The amount of people that I've had come up to me and be like, I had no idea. Now I'm going to go home and tell my friends in Wisconsin about this and have them, you know, reduce their emissions or change their diet or, you know, walk to work or bike to work instead of taking a car. So education is huge. You can also, when you're out on the water, be more conscious about the type of sunscreen that you're using. You want to look on your sunscreen when you're buying it to see if it is listed as reef safe. A caveat to that is there are a lot of companies that are able to greenwash and basically say that they're reef safe when in fact they're still not. So you want to look at the active ingredients of that sunscreen, and you want to see if it's zinc or titanium dioxide based. That is totally fine for the corals. If you're looking at things that have avobenzone, oxybenzone, or octinoxate, those are kind of the big three that you want to really step away from. But there's still a lot of debate on the physical impacts that that does to the corals, and there's debates about whether or not it's for the juvenile coral versus the adult. But again, being conscious about your sunscreen, you can talk about like shifting diet to help reduce pressures on the reef. I'm not saying you need to go vegan or vegetarian, but like I do meatless Mondays just so I'm reducing any of that stress. You can look about different ways that you commute, and even just being more conscious. Let's say you're going out and boating, trying to use all of the mooring buoys instead of anchoring, because half the time if you anchor, you may look over the side of your boat, and let's say it's like the wonderful conditions we've been having recently, and it's like what, like 4 foot, 5 foot chop, and you think you're sitting over a sand patch, but you're actually sitting over a coral head that's been growing for hundreds of years. So definitely trying to always use a mooring buoy, or if you have to anchor, being super, super conscious of where you're actually dropping that. And there's a bunch of other lists as well, but that's kind of like my top, I guess you could say.
And you expressed that you're a snorkeler.
Yes, yes, yes.
So in relation to reporting or community stewardship, you could submit reports as a snorkeler to CFAN for baseline data or bleaching data, and that's hugely impactful and important. And you can do that through the Iconic Reef Guardians program. So there definitely is. We thought about snorkelers and how they can participate and make a difference. So there's opportunity for that as well.
Okay. And I just think one more question. The last year they had that red algae that came. Is more from, I think, even Naples or the West Coast, but it came down here. I wasn't exactly sure if that had a negative impact, and thank God I haven't seen much of that now. Do you have a comment on that too?
From the coral perspective of it, I don't entirely know. What the big issue with the red algae and the red tides that we see is it creates areas or patches in the water that are basically devoid of oxygen that's dissolved in it. So a lot of that bigger issue is with like fish kills and fish die off because they're basically suffocated underwater. I don't know if I've read anything about the impacts on coral though, so that would be interesting to look into.
I think.
I have a couple of questions from Zoom, and I'll stand close enough to my phone that you don't have to repeat the question. But this one is from Rolf. He says, many locals dive with their own boats. Do you foresee a way that they can participate and help the reef?
Do you want to take it? You want me to take it?
I can take it.
Yes.
So in relation, there's tons of opportunities for people to help out in different ways. And specific to Iconic Reef Guardians, if you go through the training to become well-versed in CFAN and potentially bleach watching reports, then you have that access and that training to be able to do that on your own vessels, on your own time following that trip. And did you want to add anything?
And I would just say from the perspective of active and passive coral nursery experiences, and even getting into the road of reef experiences when we develop them, we would love to be able to have people, sorry, I'm looking at you because I'm looking at the screen. We would love to have people be able to do it independently on their boats, but given the nature of the training and kind of having the professional divers be that main guide underwater, we can't really have that outsourced capacity right now. We're still keeping a lot of it in-house within the star dive operators themselves.
Building on that, another question from our Zoom is from Sarah. She says, how many dive operators and participants do you envision being able to participate with Mission Iconic Reef in the future? Like a number, I guess, is what she's looking for.
Everyone that wants to. We want to make sure that every dive operator, Blue Star dive operator that is interested and wants to participate has opportunity and accessibility geographically to take part in this. And any clients that they have that are interested, recreational divers, snorkelers, they have multiple experiences at their fingertips that they can choose from to take part in coral reef restoration in the way that they most want to.
And my last question from our Zoom, will bleached coral ever recover, and do you plant on top of it?
I can take that from the recovery perspective, yes. One of the biggest misconceptions about coral bleaching is that bleached coral is dead coral. I always kind of liken it to the fact of like when you're sick, right? Like, hello. I mean, I was sick, I'm better now, but when you're sick, you're super stressed out, right? Your body is not doing so well. You take a bunch of medication, you get a lot of sleep, you drink a lot of orange juice and eat your body weight in soup like I've been doing for the past 2 weeks, and you get better. That is like the recovery process, unless corals eat soup. But on the flip of it is if you are not, you know, resting, getting that medication, you can go to the hospital, and if it gets super severe, you can die. It's kind of the same thing with corals, right? Corals, when they're bleached, are super stressed. They're not in a healthy state. And if the conditions that are causing that stressing event go away or lessen, that coral can naturally recover. But if those periods of stress, let's again talk about like this heat that we've been having, stays for an extended period of time, that coral is more likely going to die. So coral can recover, it just depends on how that shifts. In terms of the planting on top of it, do we have any further clarity on that question? Is it like,
I think what they were probably thinking was that, is it dead? So would you plant on top of it? But I think we got the answer.
Okay.
So
cool.
Okay. Thank you.
I've seen your hand the entire time. You go ahead.
What do you mean by iconic reef?
You want to take that one?
So the name was chosen originally, it was called, I think, the Blue Star. The question was, why is it called Iconic Reefs? What is an iconic reef? So through Mission Iconic Reefs, which is the large mission to restore Florida Keys Reefs track, there were identified 7 specific reefs that are the iconic reefs. And pardon?
They are again.
So it's Carey Sport Reef at the top, right here, and then right under it is Horseshoe. and then Chica Rocks, Sombrero Reef, Newfound Harbor, Blue Key, and then Western Dry Rocks. And these were all chosen due to location, biodiversity, multiple facets of reasons. And so Mission Iconic Reefs is playing within, Iconic Reef Guardians is playing within the words of Mission Iconic Reefs, because when it first started, it was the Blue Star program. But then after doing a working group based on Mission Iconic Reefs and how the Iconic Reef sites are going to help as kind of hubs and then grow outwards to connect the reef eventually, that we wanted to make sure that people realized how impactful the program was, that showing that you are a guardian of sites, these iconic reefs. Yes.
One more. The coral larvae have to have a clean place to settle. What's being done to provide those clean places?
Yeah, so the question was talking about coral larvae needing a place or a clean place to be able to settle, and what's currently being done. There's a lot of work focusing within Mission Iconic Reefs, also with a lot of the coral restoration practitioners as well, that are aware of that and trying to think of best next steps. With Mission Iconic Reefs, there is an entire field team that is dedicated basically to just going out and do site preparation. So a lot of that is like working to remove a lot of the algae that's growing on these 7 iconic sites. Obviously, that's a lot of work and going back and forth and constantly maintaining it and removing algae, but helping create those clear spaces for the coral to settle. Another big thing with Mission Iconic Reefs is taking a holistic restoration approach. So not just doing coral, we're looking into the cultivation and growth of a lot of herbivores on the reef. So if we can bring more herbivores to the reef and help reintroduce them, we've obviously seen such like a decline in them. Having more herbivores to remove all of that algae can also help.
How about the diabetes? Are they growing,
That's-
growing them?
I don't know if, are we per se?
So not necessarily
I
like,
wish Jim was here.
yeah. So it's part, yes, to answer your question, yes, it is part of Mission Iconic Reefs, diadema growth and reintroduction, and then consistent studies to track them and their progression and their health.
I was out in the reef, concrete actually. And there were long spines all over the place. I went out the very next day to the exact same place, and all I saw were spines.
Interesting.
They died overnight.
So, yeah, and if you're witnessing events like that, and either you have pictures or information, I can give you my card, because if you provide it to me, I can make sure that it gets to our science team and they can assess those areas.
I didn't have a camera with me, but I've got a lot of experience out there.
Yeah, even just the information is really valuable.
You really ought to, the government really ought to rein in the harvest of carp, which also eat algae.
You said reel in the harvest of parrotfish.
We're doing a better job.
I don't know who harvests parrot.
You're not allowed to harvest parrot.
The harvest of parrotfish.
The parrotfish eat the stuff off the bottom. They clean them up.
Yes, the parrotfish do help with the general, preservation of the reef.
You want to explain what diadema is?
Yes.
Yeah, so diadema, has anyone not heard of diadema before? Just so I have a gauge. I'll still explain it even if you do. So diadema is basically it's a long spine sea urchin. I don't know if any of you have seen it diving here because we're doing the large decline of it. But it's basically an urchin, also an herbivore that works to kind of help maintain the algae on the reef. I can't speak to it further, but I'm happy to also provide information for a good friend of mine named Jim Britson. He is doing a lot of research and a lot of work with diadema propagation. It's amazing work. I've sat down and like talked his ear off about it. He will say it so much better than I will though. So if any of you have interest in that diadema work as well, I'm happy to provide that kind of information.
And watching over the years, the bay disintegrating and getting more and more algae, and is there a way you can vacuum? There are like piles of algae in the bay.
Yeah. Do you
And-
have,
So
And it kills the coral.
Mm.
As soon as a coral head is surrounded, it
So-
kills it. I keep wanting to vacuum it.
So the question is in relation to algae and coral and algae overgrowth of the coral and wanting to be able to vacuum it all up.
Just a thought.
And your thought exists, which is fantastic. We're actually through the sanctuary, we're piloting a marine vacuum to be able to effectively remove algae that's out competing coral. And again, it's in kind of pilot phases, but it's really trying to come up. Mission Iconic Reefs, as JD and I have said, it's, so many components. Iconic Reef Guardians is one small component of this huge mission. And I know that for a fact that they're looking into algae removals and creating impactful, contracting people to try to create marine vacuums to remove this algae safely, effectively, and in a way that can help sustain the reefs for the future.
You can fan them, away a little bit, but it's gonna come back.
it's still there, yeah. I think I saw a couple, yeah.
Is moat your primary cultivator of the corals, or do you do any of it independently of moat?
So the question is, moat the primary cultivator of the corals. May I ask, are you speaking in relation to Iconic Reef Guardians, the stewardship program, or Mission Iconic Reefs, the larger program?
Yeah.
Both fantastic. So for Mission Iconic Reefs, we have multiple coral practitioner partners. I don't know the exact metrics of amounts of coral and species and genetics, but I know that we partner with a multitude of coral practitioners throughout the entirety of the Florida Keys.
Okay.
For Iconic Reef Guardians, we are currently partnering with Coral Restoration Foundation, Moat Marine Laboratory, and Reef Renewal USA to create experiences within their in-water coral nurseries. And right now we have one nursery from each of the coral practitioners that we're currently building up.
Post bleaching event, game plan changed? You got any,
Yeah, I mean,
insights or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
our program shut down, so yeah, so the question was, post bleaching event, what's happening, what's changing? Did you want to talk?
Mind if I show? Yeah, go ahead.
So this is an innovation
But-
in response.
Announce who you are
Yeah,
and
hi,
what you're.
this is Bob Murray. I'm a board member at the museum, and I also do a lot of work with Reef Renewal. A number of the practitioners have come up with this, but this is Reef Renewal's version of a shade. One thing we noticed during the most recent bleaching events was you'd have corals basically at the same temperature. The corals at the top would have worse bleaching than the corals down below. And we think in part it's attributable to the UV rays, and the underside of the coral would be less bleached than the coral on the top. So one of the many innovations that people are working on, all of the practitioners, this is a shade designed to limit the amount of UV
Okay, so
rays.
you are seeing correlation between UV exposure.
Oh, we absolutely are. Yeah.
So we shallow the reefs
And-
Chica,
Right, Jake Roxcott did obviously very hard. One other thing that was done was a deep water reef with emergency permitting was installed at 70 feet. And almost 4,000 corals were taken into a deep water nursery, where not only the temperature is less, but the UV rays are less. And then after the temperature cooled down. So a lot of things are being done, yes.
And then there's also a lot of look right now in big pushes for like tech and innovation and trying to like basically crowdsource a lot of knowledge that currently exists like in places like that of Australia that have seen bleaching years before us. So there's big conversations going on right now about how can we implement tech and innovation that's done in other places to also to the Keys. So that way when we see a bleaching event again, we're going to be able to address it in a much better capacity.
There's also components of the sanctuary field team who's doing extensive surveys and assessments throughout the entirety of the Florida Keys to try to identify what the result of the bleaching event was, what survived, why did it survive, what didn't, why didn't it, and try to take those studies and that data and be able to use it in the future effectively. So there's so many organizations that are involved and were impacted by the bleaching event. And I think that everyone in their own way had to, as we kind of did, pivot to assess for what the future looks like.
We have another question back here. Sorry, I came in a little late, but I wondered if you brought up, there was a documentary film called Chasing Coral, which is really tough to get through, but if you can do it, it's one of the most amazing films everyone in the world have seen it, and it does address a lot of this on global scale too. And it's just
Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, that's a really incredible film. And what was mentioned was Chasing Coral, which is a documentary that tracks the process and nature of coral bleaching, and was one of, I think, the first attempts to show visually impactful ways to express to the public what bleaching was and why it was important.
I think it's on
Netflix. Yeah. Yes.
I saw another hand somewhere. Yeah.
Have they found another solution for the PVC pipe?
Yes. So have they found another solution to the PVC pipe?
Yeah, afterward you can go in our coral exhibit. Again, this is Bob Murray. In our coral exhibit, you'll see something we call a vern, which is a vertical growth nursery, which this is boulder corals here, and it's not yet feasible for boulder corals, but the staghorn and the elkhorn coral that you're perhaps familiar with, the vertical rope nurseries are literally just the rope and the float, and they eliminate all of this PVC. And what you do is you take a small piece of coral, you twist open the rope, you put it in, you twist the rope closed, and you'll see it. There's an example in there you can see. And so you've eliminated all of that PVC for the branching corals, for the elkhorn and the
Yeah, and there's different practitioners that are looking over different technology and different innovative ways to continue improving coral nurseries as we know them. And Iconic Reef Guardians plans to help support anything that changes within our learning materials. That way we can adapt to the way that coral restoration adapts in the future.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering about how you're communicating with all the different organizations, or are you, and are there lessons learned that you incorporate in what you're doing here?
So the question revolves around how are we communicating with all these different organizations, and from the lessons learned, what are we doing with those lessons learned, and how are we keeping track of them? So JD and I work with a multitude of organizations, and it's always growing, which we love. And through Mission Iconic Reefs, there's some organizations that overlap with us and others that don't necessarily overlap with us currently. But we're always interested in having conversations with people and organizations that have ideas of how to benefit or improve the program, since it still is new. And JD and I also have a very lengthy
Google
document that we started when we first came on, even prior
to you and me starting.
And it talks about how Iconic Reef Guardians was created, what goes into it, different program pivots, and why those occurred. Just that way, if sometime down the road, once this is fully functioning as a program, or even now, if people want some of our lessons learned, if someone in Australia reaches out to us, then we have documentation that we're able to provide to people. And the QR code that we had up on the screen is live and available to anyone who scans it for free. And so we've also been able to allow people to that free online learning to use in different ways as well.
And then also with like the collaborative nature that we have, let's say with like CRF, Moat, and Reef Renewal, with all the content that, again, if you scan that QR code, you can kind of get a glimpse of it. We didn't come to them and say, this is what we're doing it this way, like to be a part of our program. It was very much like a fluid conversation of what works for CRF, what works for Moat, what works for Reef Renewal as we're building this out. Okay, cool. Make that content, put it in the system, bring Quiescence and Florida Keys Dive Center on board. Quiescence and Florida Keys Dive Center give us questions, comments, concerns, what worked, what didn't, adjust it, keep on going and we continue to have that conversation. So like, let's say like with Quiescence, 2 years from now, we can say, cool, you were our pilot operator when we first started this entire thing. And Q could come to us and say, this doesn't work anymore. And we'd say, cool, let's shift and adjust. And we keep track of it in that document. So we can basically have this huge metadata resource.
JD and I are actually just vessels for all the organizations just to collaborate through, and we just put it into actual play.
So that was an interesting comment you just made. So my question is, what are you doing? How are you monitoring bad practices? How are you monitoring bad science? There was a large part of the die-off that kind of had to do with bad science and maybe bad practices.
So the question that was asked revolved around how are we managing our practices and combating bad science within Iconic Reef Guardians. So we're doing this in a couple of ways. All of the experiences have extensive protocols that are implemented through the online training that people have to abide by. And if they don't uphold reporting and training requirements, or if there's report of malfunctions within certain spaces of the coral practitioners, then those dive operators are talked to and best practices are assessed in that manner. In relation to data, that's why specifically through right now reporting mechanisms, the dive pros do all the reporting and they have very extensive training, and each training module has a reciprocal knowledge review that they also have to pass, and they have to at least get 80% on all the knowledge reviews to even be considered to take part in the in-water training experience. Then once they've taken part in the in-water training experience and they've been signed off by the coral practitioner themselves, then they can take part in taking clients there. When they take the clients there, they have to report after the trips and let us know how it went, answer questions on conditions, answer questions on ratios, answer questions that also help the coral practitioners. Did you see anyone anchored in the nursery? Did you see damage to anything within the nursery? And then we're able to take that data and those pictures that they provide us and give them to the coral practitioners. That way they're made aware of anything the dive operators see in real time.
And then we're also looking into like the idea of almost doing like a secret shopper per se, where we can start bringing other, I see your head, where we can have individuals, like right now, like I tend to be the secret shopper where I like pop on the boat, but obviously these operators are like,
No one knows you.
JD, you're here, I wonder why. So we're also looking into kind of getting secret shoppers, or even just more like casual, whether it's pulling from like, let's say like a CRF internship or like reef renewal volunteers who are aware of the practices and protocols for those respective nurseries, or even when we get to the concept of like a reef experience, who can join and be like, I'm here to dive, and just kind of passively observe. And that way, I mean, the dive shops that we work with are great. They report everything. They're super like on top of it. But for whatever reason, if they're like fudging a number, we can have people who are going to be able to capture it and report that and then come back to us, and then we can address it if we need to. That's easy.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Maddie and JD. They will be around if anybody else has questions. You want to come up and talk to them one-on-one. If you want the QR code, we'll pass that out. We'll probably, if it's not in the exhibit already, it'll be there tomorrow. We'll add it. And there's also information for those of you who didn't get a chance to see the Dive into Art Coral Creations. It will be open tomorrow to see the burn and other things. We already have it closed for tonight. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for Emily's family for joining us tonight. Glenn, also thank you for bringing the college students in to learn more about these practices. We just want to get the word out and expand it in the community. So thank you for being part of it tonight, and have a good evening.
Thank you.